Hello, sports history fans. I'm Ross from the podcast Pigskin Tales. You're about to jump into another thrilling sports history moment, but first, let's dive into today's sponsor, just in time for the holiday season. Introducing Art of Words, the brainchild of word artist Dan Duffy from Philadelphia. Dan meticulously crafts stunning images by handwriting relevant words from some of the greatest sports moments in time. These unique budget-friendly illustrations are the perfect gift, sparking cherished memories and capturing hearts. Choose from city skylines, sports, history, and musicians to find a piece for everyone. And here's the exciting part. For that sports fanatic in your life, gift them a piece of their favorite team or player's history. Art of Words tells a compelling story. Explore collegiate stadiums, each meticulously crafted with every football victory etched into words. Or venture into baseball stadiums, handwritten with every player from the team's illustrious history. My favorite on the site is Bryce Harper 2021 MVP year. Because I'm a big stats guy, I think that's one of the coolest things ever. Check it out. Don't wait. Order a print today for yourself and your loved one this holiday season. Transform your wall into a gallery of captivating art and surprise your family and friends with a print of their own. Use code SHN15 at artofwords.com for a 15% discount on your order in November and December. Visit Art of Words, where words magically transform into stunning art, evoking cherished memories and touching the hearts of those who you care about. Again, use the code SHN15 for 15% off at artofwords.com.
When you talk about coaches of the early Super Bowl era, George Allen has to come to mind. Author Mike Richman has written a book recently on George Allen titled George Allen, A Football Life. Mike joins us in just a moment to tell us all about the life of this great and interesting coach. Coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome to another edition where we get to talk about a great legend of the game of football. And this is coming from the professional level, pretty much. And we have our friend Mike Richman here. He has a book on George Allen called George Allen, A Football Life. Mike, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Great to be here, Darren.
Yeah, Mike, George Allen, a very interesting figure indeed. Back in the 60s and the 70s was his era, and just an interesting guy all around. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about George's background before he got to what we know him as with the Los Angeles Rams and the Washington Redskins. Maybe how he got up through the ranks of professional football.
Sure. Well, I could start with his college coaching. His very, very first coaching job was at the University of Michigan. He was a graduate student at Michigan, has both his bachelor's and graduate degrees from Michigan. And he got a job as an assistant coach on the 150-pound midget team, which started for the first time in 1948. It was a 4-team league in the Midwest, Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Indiana, I believe. Those were the 4 schools. And so he was an assistant coach for that one season. 1947 he was an assistant coach on that team. And then in 1948, the following year, he got his first true head coaching job at Morningside College in Iowa. That's how he broke into the head coaching ranks. He coached in college through 1956. He was 3 years at Morningside, and then he coached for 6 years at Whittier in the Los Angeles area. And he had a plus 500 record over that 9-year period, but he left after the 1956 season. Some of the players were a little kind of disenchanted with him, his conservative style offense. They didn't really appreciate. And also, the school administration didn't really appreciate some of the approaches that he took with his coaching, his recruiting, his scholarships that he was handing out. It was too much. He was spending too much money, they thought. So basically, as I wrote in the book, he was forced to resign after the 56 season. 57, he was an assistant coach for the Los Angeles Rams, interestingly, as an offensive ends coach. Sid Gilman was the head coach at the time. And I wondered why they hired him as an offensive ends coach, because he was a defensive oriented coach. And I believe it was, and actually I got to interview his daughter about this, and it's because he could focus, he knew the tendencies of the opposing defense. So that's why they hired him as the offensive ends coach. But again, he was basically forced out after the 57 season. He was out of coaching for almost the entire 58 season, but the Bears brought him in as a spy toward the end of the season. They had 2 games against the Los Angeles Rams toward the end of the season. So George Halas brought him in as a spy. And then Halas became to admire him. The head talent scout for the Bears at the time passed away. So Halas hired him as the Bears head talent scout in 1959. That's how he got in with the Bears. He was with the Bears through the 65 season. It was a very memorable period because he was leading the draft at the time. He drafted 3 future Hall of Fame players: Mike Ditka in 1961. The 1965 draft has to go down as one of the greatest drafts in NFL history. He drafted Butkus with the number 3 pick in the first round, Sayers the following pick, number 4. In that top 10 of picks, he drafted Steve DeLong with number 8, an offensive tackle. DeLong didn't play for the Bears. He went to play for the San Diego Chargers in the AFL, and he was a single one-time Pro Bowler with the Chargers. And in the 4th round, the Bears drafted a running back named Jim Nance, who went to play for the Boston Patriots in the AFL. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler and a 2-time All-Pro in the AFL. If DeLong and Nance actually had come to play for the Bears, I mean, that would have made that draft like, you would have had to put it up against the 74 Steelers draft. You could probably still put it up there with Butkus and Sayers and so forth. But yes, yeah. So he was the head talent scout for that whole period. He was elevated to the head defensive coach in 1960. Well, in 1962, he replaced Clark Shaughnessy toward the end of the season. Shaughnessy was on the outs with Halas as the defensive coach, and Shaughnessy held a few other roles. And so Allen took over as the head defensive coach at that time. And then heading into the 1963 season, he was elevated to the head defensive coach for the Bears. And that season, the Bears won the NFL championship. They won it with one of the most ferocious defenses in NFL history. And Allen was the key architect of that win. I mean, they yielded only like 144 points through the regular season. And so Allen was carried off the field after the game, by the way. Halas was not carried off the field. Allen was also, they were both given game balls, but in the post-game locker room, they also chanted in the, and this had been initiated several years prior by another Bears player, "Hooray for George, he's a horse's ass." But that song, the Redskins also sang it in later years when Allen became the coach there. But I want to read you a quote by Ed Obradovich, who was a great Bears defensive tackle at the time, in terms of how he credited George Allen with that championship win. And Obradovich has no doubt who engineered the victory in that championship game. It was a 14-10 win over the Giants. Obradovich says, quote, "In my mind, everything goes to George Allen. We scored 2 touchdowns, both on quarterback sneaks. Our offense didn't move that well. That defense proved without a doubt that you can win a world championship with defense." So Allen was the key architect of that win, and not only in the mind of Obradovich, but many of the other Bears players thought the same thing. But Halas refused to promote him to head coach. Halas, he had been around for so many years. As you know, he was part of the initial meeting in Canton that formed the NFL in 1920. So he had been there for so many years. He refused to step down after the 1963 season. A few years went by. 1965, Allen was getting antsy. He wanted that head coaching job. So he got the offer from the Los Angeles Rams. Dan Reeves, the Rams owner, offered him the job. Halas still refused to step down. Instead, he took George Allen to court in Cook County Circuit Court in the Chicago area. He sued him for breach of contract. He said that Allen had this proprietary information that he would be taking to the Rams, and that Halas didn't. He refused to let him go. So the judge eventually ruled for Halas in the case. Halas, though, said at that point, I've made my point. I won on principle. George Allen, you're free to go to any team you want." So Allen chose the Los Angeles Rams, but Halas made himself looked like a petulant child in that whole case, and having taken him to court. I mean, when an assistant coach, despite what's written in a contract, wants a job as a head coach with another team, you've got to let him go. I mean, but Halas was just, I think he was jealous of George Allen, and he may have had it in his mind that he would promote him in future years, but he refused to do it at that point. But anyway, he let Allen go to become the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams starting in the 1966 season.
Wow, that's a lot. I didn't realize he had that much involvement with the Bears. I knew he was there, but I didn't realize he was orchestrated that great defense and help with those great draft picks. That, and I always find it interesting that Gale Sayers and Dick Butkus draft. That I think doesn't it the saying that the two of them on the same team, the Bears never won a playoff game or never made a playoff game with those
never
on the team?
That's correct. They never made a playoff game with either one of those guys on the same team, and both of them, their careers were shortened considerably. You would think they could have played longer, but they had terrible injuries. So both of them, they were pretty much in their prime when they retired. But they were also both first ballot Hall of Fame inductees and being drafted with back-to-back picks in the first round in 1965, and then they were first ballot Hall of Famers. And so just that in itself makes that draft so amazing. But then you add DeLong and Nance, those two other guys that I mentioned in that draft. You add those two in. And then another signing that George Allen orchestrated that year was a free agent signing, a guy named Brian Piccolo, the leading rusher in the country out of Wake Forest. And Piccolo, sort of what he was portrayed as in the movie, he had a couple good seasons with the Bears. In fact, 1968 was his best season rushing. I think he rushed for more than 400 yards that year. And he was tapped heading into the 1969 season to be the starter in the backfield with Sayers. I remember in the movie, Sayers and Piccolo, they exchanged high fives, and I say, hey,
Right.
we're going to start in the backfield together. But it was that year that Piccolo took himself out of a game because he wasn't feeling right, and so I guess the cancer was starting to spread at that point.
Yeah, I had when I was in high school in the 80s, I read the book I Am Third, which the Brian Piccolo movie was adapted from Gale Sayers' book I Am Third. And probably within a month or two after me reading it, and I had no idea it was going to happen. I was working at a restaurant here where I live in Erie as a busboy, and lo and behold, I go to a table to clean it up, and I look up and I see a familiar face. Gale Sayers is sitting there with some dignitaries in Erie, Pennsylvania, of all places. He had come in for a sports banquet, which I wasn't aware that he was coming in. I got to have a conversation about it. I told him, I said, hey, I just got done reading your book. I did a book report on it. And he was the kindest man. He sat down, some busboy at a restaurant in a strange town. He sat with me for 5 minutes and had a conversation and gave me some, worldly advice as you'd expect from an older Gale Sayers. And
Right.
It's one of great guy. So I'm a big Gale Sayers fan just for the person he is. I never got to watch him play, but other than film. But yeah, he tremendous.
I can imagine you got his autograph, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Butkus as a kid for me, Butkus was my the player that I really, really looked up to. I saw myself in him. I didn't play anything past high school football, but I just his ferociousness and uh, that other players were so scared of him and just his stature on the field. I just loved him, and I wrote to the Bears. I remember this must have been like the early '70s. And he sent me a baseball card,
Nice.
signed it, Dick Butkus.
There's just two great iconic figures of NFL history that from 60 some years ago in the draft and playing, and we're still talking about. They're still relevant to even the modern fan. That tells you, in shortened careers, that just tells you how legendary they were, just to emphasize how good that draft was for the Bears. So yeah,
Right.
it's pretty amazing that George Allen was able to see the talent in those two and help get those on the Bears. Get those
Sure.
two players on the Bears.
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you one other Butkus story. So in 1974, Allen wanted to get him for the Redskins. Butkus had his contract expired with the Bears, or I think they either released him or he walked after the '73 season. So Allen tried to acquire him for the Redskins, but his knees were in such bad shape that he couldn't play football after that. '73 was his last year in the NFL. He went to see a doctor in the Midwest, I think in Oklahoma, who said, "Hey, if you want to have your knees fused, then maybe you'll be able to get on the field." But uh, he could not play football anymore,
Mm.
and Sayers had to step down. He was pretty much in his prime as well. But I mean, I'm sure you've seen tapes of him and how elusive and fast he was, and
Oh yeah.
so
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, YouTube's an amazing thing. So it's great,
yes.
good to go see anything you have film on anybody. You can go back and watch them. That's awesome. Okay, so George Allen takes over the reins of the Rams program. So tell us a little bit about what he did to the Rams, what he instilled in their program.
Sure. Well, when he came in 1966, the Rams in previous years, like over the past, I'd say 8 seasons, they were about bad to mediocre. I mean, they were really a struggling team. And so they needed a lot of rebuilding when he came. And what he did is his practices were much longer than the previous coaches. They had also this kind of partying image as a team, being in Los Angeles, uh, lots of stuff to do. They love the nightlife there, and they ran the streets really well. So George Allen got rid of all that. I mean, he was a disciplinarian, long practices in the Southern California heat. So he instilled that hard work ethic in them, and they started winning right away. They had an 8-6 season in 1966. 1967, in my opinion, was his best season as an NFL coach. They finished 11-2-1 in the regular season. They lost to the Packers in the first round of the playoffs that year, and the following week after that was the Ice Bowl. But and also those were the years when the teams rotated as host cities. So even though the Packers finished 9-4-1 that year in their division, and the Rams 11-2-1, the Rams had to go to Green Bay and play. Now, I'm not saying if the Rams had gone to Green Bay to play them, they would have won that game. I mean, they were coming off two emotionally draining games at the end of that '67 season. They beat the Packers in the final seconds in the Los Angeles Coliseum. A player named Tony Guillory blocked a punt with about a minute left in that game, and the Rams recovered and ran down to the 5-yard line, and then Roman Gabriel threw a touchdown pass to a receiver named Bernie Casey, later the actor, and so the Rams won that game. Allen was carried off the field after that one. The following week, they demolished the Baltimore Colts, and Unitas was sacked about 7 times in that game. The Rams were so sky high to play the Colts. That was in the LA Coliseum as well. They beat the Colts, and that got them into the playoffs. They won the Coastal Division. Interestingly, the Colts were also in that Coastal Division. But one thing I want to note about that Colts team, they also finished 11-1-2 that year. The Rams were 11-1-2. The Colts also were 11-1-2 that year. That Colts team didn't go to the playoffs. You can't, that's unfathomable today. That just
Right.
would not happen. We have losing teams going to the playoffs. 7 teams per conference. just back then, there was 4 total teams in the NFL that went to the postseason, and one from each division. So that Colts team didn't go. So you can imagine how good they really were. And but that Rams team lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Packers, were knocked out. Following year was a 10-3-1 season. The Rams didn't go to the playoffs. After that season, which was 1968, after the season, Dan Reeves fired George Allen. He had a phenomenal record in those first 3 years. Reeves fired him. Reeves didn't like, number one, his spending habits. His spending habits came into play again. He was spending a lot of money for the veteran players. He was on the phone a lot. Back in those days, he was driving up telephone costs. And the two they had like such differing personalities. Reeves was this partying guy. I mentioned the partying aspect of the Rams in years past. Reeves was leading the charge. Everyone knew he was an alcoholic, and there were coaches that loved to drink as well. And so Reeves was leading that. George Allen was not. He didn't drink alcoholic beverages. His favorite beverage was milk. That's what he consumed. So he and Reeves, they didn't socialize, and they rarely spoke to each other. Reeves didn't like him. I thought it was another case of jealousy too. Reeves fired him after the 68 season. Allen, though, staged a press conference at a ritzy Los Angeles hotel, and about 20 veteran Ram players showed up. Merlin Olsen, Deacon Jones, Ed Metter. Let's see. I think Rosie Greer was there. So at this press conference, these veteran Ram players said, and they had been a winner under Allen in those first 3 seasons. They said, hey, if Dan Reeves, if you don't rehire George Allen, we're quitting. So several weeks later, Reeves rehired Allen. Now he said that it had nothing to do with what the players said at that point, but I think what the players said had a lot to do with it. I mean, you read between the lines. I mean, if he was going to lose those veteran players, they weren't going to have much of a team.
Right. If you have the fearsome foursome on your side coming in to speak on your behalf, people are going to listen to those guys. That's for
I think
sure.
Lamar Lundy was another one of those players. No, I don't think Greer was there. I think he had already retired, but Lundy was there, and they were like a total of 20 veteran Rams, and yeah, they basically said we're going to retire if you don't rehire George Allen. So this was like it had to be an unprecedented situation in NFL history at the time. So yeah, Reeves rehired him after the 68 season, 69 and 70, which those were Allen's last 2 years. 69, they went 11-3. Again, they were knocked out in the first round of the playoffs to a really good Vikings team that later played in Super Bowl IV, losing to the Chiefs. And then in 1970, they finished 9-4-1, and Reeves fired him for the second time. I want to say about that 69 team. So the Rams started 11-0 that year, and they lost their last 3 regular season games and then went into the playoffs and lost to the Vikings. They gave the Vikings a fight in that first round playoff game. They lost 23-20 in Minnesota. But one of the knocks on George Allen over the years is that he worked his players so hard during the regular season, and he was such a great motivator, getting them up for games, and with his rah personality, that they were basically burned out toward the end of that 69 season, and they lost their last 3 regular season games. Because I don't remember him sitting too many of his veteran players in that first loss, which I think was to the Bears, if I'm correct, or to either the Bears or the Vikings. I don't remember him really sitting his players, basically rolling over. I don't recall him doing that early in that losing streak, but they lost those last 3 games and then went into the playoffs on that losing streak with an 11-3 record. 1970, pretty much everyone knew that if Allen didn't make the Super Bowl that year, that he was going to be fired. And certainly Reeves fired him after that season, and that's when he was hired by the Redskins a few weeks later.
So it was sort of it happened more than once where he had some great starts, great out of the gate, but the team was just wore down by the end of the season, sort of collapsed at the end of the season in the playoffs. I'm
Yeah,
gathering.
yes, pretty much so. I mean, that 11-1-2 team in 1967, they were just even I quoted Merlin Olsen in the book as saying that they were just emotionally drained by the time they got to the playoffs. And even Allen said that in a quote that I found from the past, that there's no way that we would have beaten Green Bay in that playoff game. They actually took a 7-0 lead in that game, but Green Bay, Lombardi had kind of disguised his plans before the game. He said, we're not going to be able to run the ball. You know, several of our running backs are out injured, but certainly they rammed it down the Rams' throats in that playoff game. I mean, they really ran the ball well. So, and then in that 69 season, like I said, they started at 11-0 and they lost their last 3 games. So that was one of the knocks on George Allen over the years, that he got his players so motivated for most of the regular season, and then they just ran out of steam toward the end.
Yeah, that's just amazing. You would think in this day and age, if a coach has tremendous records like that, even if he's not winning, except for maybe somebody like Marty Schottenheimer, who sort of had a similar situation happen to Allen. But you would never let that coach go if they were winning year after year. They're hard to find to get coaches that can keep teams like that. But I guess that was a different era.
Right. Well, I think if Allen were coaching today, I think the owners would keep him on. I think that it was more of a personality conflict, unless he didn't get along with the owners today. But I think it was with Reeves. It was very much a personality conflict. I mean, the two just didn't see eye to eye. One thing that really bothered Reeves is that Reeves controlled the draft. Reeves was known as this expert on scouting in the NFL, and actually George Allen did inherit a few really good players that Reeves and his scouting team had found before he arrived. Merlin Olsen, Deacon Jones, Roman Gabriel. There were other players, Ed Metter. I mean, there was some pretty good talent on that Rams team when Allen arrived. But as you clearly know, I mean, you need a coach to get that chemistry together and get and organize everything, and have nail down the right X's and O's that a team must be following. It just you need the right coach to be leading at that point. They just didn't have the right coaches beforehand. So, but yeah, he and Reeves just had this personality conflict. So Reeves controlled the draft. Allen had control of the active player roster. So one thing that bothered Reeves is that he really liked a quarterback named Bill Munson. He was the backup to Roman Gabriel, Bill Munson. But Allen got rid of him. Okay, Allen traded him. But Reeves really liked him, but Allen traded him. Allen also traded the Heisman Trophy winner out of UCLA, Gary Beeben. Allen didn't think Beeben was going to be much of anything. I mean, Allen knew he was a hybrid quarterback at UCLA. He ran the ball a lot. So Allen didn't think he was going to be much of an NFL quarterback. He traded him to the Redskins, and the Rams picked up some pretty good draft picks in that trade. Well, Reeves didn't like that trade at all. Okay, so that's one time where they really disagreed, and Reeves didn't appreciate that Allen had let Beeben go. But Beeben didn't have much of a career in DC at all. I mean, he was with the Redskins for 2 seasons. Two seasons, 68 and 69 probably, and then he was cut by the Redskins, so he didn't have much of a career at all. So Allen was right about that. So, but it was very much a personality conflict between Allen and Reeves.
We'll be back with more from this interview in just a moment, right after this.
The memorable moments were many. Franco Harris's immaculate reception, Roger Staubach's Hail Mary. But the decade's greatest teams were defined by defense. Author Michael McCambridge. Joe Zagorski's podcast, Pro Football in the 1970s, pays homage to a time when defense ruled the gridiron. Soundtrack provided by Horst Hoffman of FilmMusic.io.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hey, this is Del Reed, co-founder of Bill's Mafia and founder of 26shirts.com, where behind every shirt there is a story, and you are listening to the Pigskin Dispatch.
And now we return to our interview with our special guest. So he's out in LA. How long is he out of a job before somebody becomes interested in his services?
Just a few days. The Redskins had actually been interested in him after the '68 season. Allen knew Jack Kent Cooke. Cook owned the Los Angeles Lakers and Los Angeles Kings, and he was based in Los Angeles. So Allen knew him, and Cook, they became friends. Cook would invite him to his ranch in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And Allen also came to know Edward Bennett Williams, who ran the daily operations of the Redskins. I should say that Cook was inching toward becoming the majority owner of the Redskins at the time. He held the largest percentage, and he would soon become the majority owner. So he had a lot of power on the team. And Williams also liked Allen. They had met at a league meeting in Hawaii, I believe, after the '66 season. So Williams came to really admire him. He loved his work ethic and everything. So both pretty much Cook went hard after George Allen after the '68 season. But Allen wanted to fulfill his 5-year contract with the Rams. He said, Jack, I know I'm probably going to get fired after the 1970 season, but I want to fulfill my contract. So he stayed with LA through the 5-year period of his contract. And then Cook and Williams brought him to Washington just a few days after Reeves fired him for the second time. It was like Reeves fired him right after the 1970 season. And the first week in January, Allen was hired as the Redskins coach.
Okay, so now Allen would have been Vince Lombardi's replacement, correct? Is that
Lombardi?
Or was there somebody in between?
There was somebody in between. Lombardi coached in '69.
Okay.
And then he passed away right before the 1970 season.
Okay.
So then there was an interim coach for the Redskins in 1970.
Okay.
Right.
But he would have been the first permanent assigned coach after.
Correct. He would have been the first permanent coach post Lombardi. But Lombardi only coached 1 year, '69.
So he has sort of adopted Beeben, who he traded then.
Beeben was not on the team anymore.
Oh, okay. So Beeben was gone too. Okay.
Beeben had been cut prior to the 1970 season. Yeah, the Redskins, they quickly got rid of him. He was history. Yeah, so no, Allen did not adopt him. but I don't think Allen would have had much of him anyway. So, but Allen did inherit some pretty good players with the Redskins too, mostly on offense. The Redskins had a very good offense in the 1960s, led by Sonny Jurgensen, who had his best passing years with the Redskins during that time, from the mid to late '60s, and he had some amazing receivers: Charlie Taylor, Bobby Mitchell, Jerry Smith. 1 year, 1967, Jurgensen led the league in passing. Taylor was number 1 in receiving in total catches. Smith was number 2, and then Mitchell was number 4. And actually, Jerry Smith was a great receiving tight end. Yeah. So that was
okay. They had the number 1, 2, and 4 top receivers in the NFL in one season.
Yes, 1, 2, and 4 in catches in the NFL in the same season. He had a smorgasbord of receivers to throw to. They were a very exciting team, and it was a major reason that RFK Stadium started selling out in 1966. They were a very entertaining offensive team, but they had no defense. I mean, the defense was basically mediocre. I mean, you could step all over that defense. They were relinquishing so many points. So, but Allen inherited all those except for Mitchell. Mitchell retired before the '69 season, but Allen inherited Jurgensen, Taylor, Jerry Smith. On defense, he had Chris Hamburger, who's in the Hall of Fame today, Brig Owens, who is very high on the list of career interception leaders today for the Redskins with 36. Very good defensive back. Bill Brundage, a really good defensive lineman. Larry Brown, Pittsburgh native, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He was a 1,000-yard rusher in 1970. Allen inherited him. But again, it was a situation where the head coach had to find a way to make all of that talent work. Get that chemistry flowing on the team.
Yeah, definitely. They're the spoon that stirs a drink there, aren't they? So would you consider Allen a player's coach? I know he's sort of runs the hard line, but sometimes those can be somewhat of a player's coach, you know. So I'm just trying to get a feel for, you know, insider information. You know, what was he like as a head man on the sideline?
I would consider him a player's coach in the sense that there were many players that liked him and appreciated his practices. Like the players that really liked him were the players that he saved from other teams. He traded for a lot of veteran players. And they could have been on the outs with their previous teams, like Roy Jefferson was on the outs with Carroll Rosenblum, the owner of the Baltimore Colts, even though
Mm-hmm.
they had won a Super Bowl in 1970, Super Bowl V. Allen traded for him. Ron McDowell was on the outs with the Buffalo Bills. Allen traded for him. Billy Kilmer, Allen resuscitated his career. Kilmer was basically a mid-range quarterback for the Saints. He was pretty good, but he was nowhere near elite. Allen rescued his career, brought him to Washington. Allen saw something in him. They Rams played the Saints a few times when Allen was in L.A. and he really liked Kilmer. So he resuscitated the careers of a lot of players, and even a lot of the veteran players that were here. Pat Fisher being one. Pitt Fisher really liked George Allen. I mean, Brig Owens liked him. Uh, Owens was considered one of Allen's lieutenants on the field. Fisher as well, Chris Hamburger. They really liked him. So then there were other players that they didn't so much like George Allen. They felt that he would he was a little sleazy in the way he handled personnel matters. He didn't always tell people exactly the moves he was going to make. So yeah, so not every player loved him, but I would say a lot of the players that where he resuscitated their careers, they would sing his praises all day.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you go back and think about it, the LA Rams, if they had 20 people showing up at his, departure or what he thought was his final swan song there in LA as a press conference, and they came in support, they had to like him. So, very interesting. Okay, so how did his Washington teams fare? You know, he has this talent he inherited. He's bringing this veteran presence and talent in. So how is he doing as a Redskins head coach?
So 1971, his first season in Washington, the Redskins finished 9-4-1. They went to the postseason for the first time since 1945, first time in a quarter century. They went
Wow.
to the playoffs. It was only their fourth. Let's see, they had four. I'm sorry, they had four previous winning seasons prior to Allen's arrival in 1971.
Hmm.
So 1971, 9-4-1. They lost again in the first round of the playoffs to the San Francisco 49ers. They played in San Francisco the year. The Redskins were actually up in that game. They were leading at halftime 10-3, but then they wilted in the second half. And that actually is the game of Nixon's play call.
Yeah.
Allen and Richard Nixon had a friendship. They originally met when Allen was the college coach at Whittier in the early 50s. They met at an NCAA banquet. Nixon's alma mater was Whittier. So that's when they first met. So when they intersected in the nation's capital in 1971, Nixon was in his third year in the White House and Allen, first year coaching the Redskins. And actually that season, uh, Nixon came out to Redskins Park, the Redskins training facility, and he gave the Redskins a pep talk. He wanted to come out. The Redskins were struggling a little bit that year. They in their previous three games they had a tie and two losses. So he came out to Redskins Park. He gave them a pep talk, and then by the time they played the 49ers in the first round of the playoffs that year, uh, the Redskins used a play that Nixon had suggested he would like to see them running. It was an end around play to Roy Jefferson. He unfortunately got caught for a 10-yard loss on that play, knocked the Redskins back. They missed the field goal attempt, and they went into halftime ahead 10-3. They could have been up 17-3 or at the least 13-3, but they went up 10-3. They were demoralized. They lost. They relinquished the lead in the second half and lost that game. The following year, 1972, Allen took the Redskins to their first Super Bowl, Super Bowl VII. They lost in that game to the Miami Dolphins, who finished that season undefeated at 17-0. They lost 14-7 in that game. The two playoff games that were in the Redskins were in prior to the Super Bowl. They beat the Green Bay Packers in the first round, and they beat the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC Championship game. I was at both of those games at RFK Stadium. The win over the Cowboys, 26-3 in the NFC Championship game that year, just a total demolition job by the Redskins. I mean, that was Allen's crowning moment as head coach in the NFL. The fact that he didn't win the Super Bowl the next week and then never got past the first round of the playoffs again, that NFC Championship game was his crowning moment. He not only won the NFC Championship and punched his ticket to Super Bowl VII, but he beat the Cowboys. The stakes were really high. I mean, Allen despised the Cowboys. I mean, he intensified the Redskins-Cowboys rivalry. They had a little bit of a rivalry in the 60s when Sonny Jurgensen was the Redskins quarterback. Don Meredith was the Cowboys quarterback. They played some really high-scoring games, very exciting. But the rivalry escalated to a new level when Allen came to coach here in 1971. He didn't like the Cowboys because he didn't like Tex Schramm, who had a friendly relationship with Dan Reeves. Tex Schramm was one of the Cowboys executives, and then Reeves, NFL commissioner. The two had previously spent time together on the staff of the Los Angeles Rams in the 1950s. Also, Dan Reeves was friends with Rozelle. So Reeves previously the Rams owner. So I'm sure Reeves didn't say the most flattering things to Rozelle about.
Well, Rozelle was a Los Angeles guy, right? Didn't he come out of Los Angeles?
I believe he came from San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
I believe he was from San Francisco, but he was the public relations director for the Rams for part of the 1950s.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking. Okay.
Right. That's how he became aligned with that organization, and he came to know Tex Schramm. So Allen thought there was some conspiracy on the part of the Cowboys and NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle in terms of the decision making. And sure enough, the first three regular season games in 1971 were NFC East games on the road for the Redskins. Now that would be unfathomable today. I don't think that would ever happen. But the way the scheduling was set up, the Redskins played their first three games against NFC East opponents on the road. They won all three games. They beat the Cardinals, Giants, and Cowboys in Dallas. They won their first 5 games that season, and like I said, they finished 9-4-1. So, and also when they beat the Cowboys, when the plane got back from Dallas and landed at Dulles Airport, there were about 10,000 fans that stormed Dulles Airport to greet the Redskins players coming back and to congratulate Allen and the players. I mean, they were longing for a winner. This town, it had been 1945 since the Redskins had gone to a NFL championship game, and 42 since they had won one. So nothing had happened in this town in terms of a winner. The Senators baseball team, they were nothing. They actually moved out. They moved to Arlington, Texas at the beginning of that 71 season. So there was no baseball team, no Major League Baseball team in Washington. There was no NBA team. The Washington Bullets hadn't moved here yet, or the Baltimore Bullets, I should say. They hadn't moved here yet. And there was no hockey team. The Washington Capitals didn't start here till 1974. The Redskins were the only game in town. And Allen really seized that opportunity.
Okay. Very interesting. So what was sort of, how did his career end with Washington? What happened there with him leaving the Redskins?
So after the 72 season, he went to the playoffs 3 more times, losing in the first round each time, 73, 74, and 76. And before the 1977 season, in the offseason, Edward Bennett Williams offered him a contract extension, but he never signed it. And this just dragged on through the 77 season. It was a 4-year extension. It just dragged on. And by the end of the 77 season, Allen still didn't sign that extension. At the same time, the Los Angeles Rams job opened up. Chuck Knox, the Rams coach, he left that Rams job and he went to Buffalo to become the head coach of the Buffalo Bills. So that job was open. Allen, as I write in the book, a really strong theory is that he wanted to return to Los Angeles. He and his wife wanted to go back to LA. They still had their home in Palos Verdes Estates, which was uh, that's a Los Angeles suburb. They still had their home there. So they wanted to go back there. So Allen never signed the extension, and Williams just let him walk at a certain point. He said, George Allen has I've given George Allen unlimited patience, and he has exceeded it. It was actually a play on words to what Williams said in 1971. Allen built Redskins Park for $500,000. Williams said at the time, I gave him an unlimited budget, and he exceeded it. So that was another thing. The money part, Williams didn't appreciate a lot of the things that Allen was doing, a lot of the decision making on his part. Allen had full control. He had control of the draft. He had control of the active player roster. He had control all the money spending. Williams didn't appreciate it, and they were also at each other's throats. But Williams still offered him that contract extension heading into the 77 season, which Allen never signed.
Interesting. So if we look back at George Allen, his professional coaching career, what's his legacy as a coach in the NFL?
Well, record-wise, he never had a losing seasons in 12 years of coaching in the NFL and 14 seasons overall. He coached for 2 years in the NFL. He's the only coach in NFL history to not suffer a losing season in more than 10 years of coaching. Today, he's number 3 all time in regular season winning percentage for coaches with at least 100 career victories, 721 winning percentage. That's phenomenal. I mean, he's third. John Madden is number 1 and Lombardi's number 2. So in 21 years in pro football overall, he was only associated with 2 losing teams, the 1960 and 1964 Bears. Aside from that, I mean, he was an amazing, tremendous innovator. He was a pioneer on special teams and defense. On defense, he introduced schemes like the nickelback, the 5 defensive backs, and the dime defense, 6 defensive backs. Those are very innovative for their time. He had these really creative blitz packages. On special teams, he hired one of the first true special teams coaches. He hired Dick Vermeil as the Rams special teams coach in 1969. The Eagles hired Marv Levy the same year to coach their special teams in 69. So he hired one of the first special teams coaches, but he put emphasis on special teams that no other head coach had ever done. I mentioned that block punt in the Packers game. There were other really pivotal plays that his teams made in plays on special teams that decided the games. He would count on his special teams for 1 or 2 wins per season. So he was really, really an innovator in the area of special teams. One year, 1976, he asked a former Redskins player named Bill Malinchak, who was a master punt blocker from like 1971 through 74. Malinchak blocked like 4 punts, but he retired after that 74 season. So by 1976, Malinchak was a commodities broker on Wall Street. So Allen asked him to come back toward the end of the 76 season. He said, Bill, I have one. You only have to make one great play on special teams. I know you can do it. So Malinchak left his job on Wall Street. He came back to play for the Redskins in the last 3 regular season games that year. I mean, he was obviously making a lot of money on Wall Street, making much less when he came back to play for the Redskins. So I asked him, why would you do that? He said, I would do anything for George Allen. I'll come back. If George called me, I'd be there. Sure enough, in the final regular season game that year, 1976, Malinchak blocked a punt. He blocked Danny White's punt. Danny White was the Cowboys punter and backup quarterback at the time. He blocked Danny White's punt in the season-ending regular season game against the Cowboys that year. The Redskins won that game and then lost in the first round of the playoffs that year. That win qualified them for the playoffs. They lost in the first round of the playoffs that year.
Amazing story. Why don't we give them the name of the book and places where they can purchase it?
Sure. The name of the book is George Allen, A Football Life. And anyone can get an author autographed copy by going to my website, MikeRichmanJournalist.com/books. MikeRichmanJournalist.com/books. and Richman is Richman. My Twitter handle is @MSR_journalist. But anyone can get an author autographed copy by going to my website. The book is also available through Amazon and also through Nebraska Press, which is my publisher.
Okay. And folks, if you're driving or don't have a pen and pencil, we'll put that link in the show notes of the podcast. You can get hooked right into Mike's website and take him up on that offer, getting the autographed book. That's always a great thing to have the author sign the book too. That's very personalized. So that's a great thing you're doing. So let's we have a few minutes here. What's you have any final thoughts on on George Allen?
Sure. Well, I failed to mention, and you asked me about his legacy. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was inducted in 2002, and he's certainly deserving of it. I mean, I've gotten the question, why not Marty Schottenheimer today? Wasn't Schottenheimer sort of like the George Allen of yesteryear? I mean, Schottenheimer had an amazing regular season record, and he made many more playoff games than George Allen did, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. I think Marty Schottenheimer should eventually get in the Hall of Fame, but I think what pushed George Allen over the hill and into Canton was his innovations. Now, it wasn't only his record, but his innovations, like I was explaining on defense and special teams, that really put him a step above many other coaches of his time. Also, for that era when he coached, he was one of the elite coaches at the time. I mean, he was with Lombardi and Shula. He was on par with them as one of the elite coaches in that era. So he was he was known as one of the best at that time.
Yeah, if you think about it, the diamond and nickel are probably 40-50% of defensive packages in today's modern game. They're quite common, especially with the way the offenses are throwing their personnel out on the field. So that is a major innovation. So is that the comparison is between him and Schottenheimer because they're winning coaches that weren't championship winning coaches?
Basically, yeah. It's like why George Allen and not Marty Schottenheimer? I've gotten that question. I think it's a legitimate question. I think Schottenheimer was a phenomenal coach, and like I said, I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and I hope he is inducted someday. I think what separates Allen from Schottenheimer is the innovations, the things that he introduced to the game, and like you said, those nickel and dime packages, and even special teams themselves are so integral to the game of football today. I mean, Bill Belichick, he wasn't a disciple of George Allen, but he adopted a lot of Allen's special teams ploys. In fact, he read Allen's book on special teams, and in fact, I toward the end of the book, I mentioned that Belichick he learned a lot from George Allen in terms of special teams. So that area of the game, which is so key, and we see it today, it decides so many games, returns and block kicks and whatever. George Allen was really the first coach that put the most emphasis on that facet of football, and I think it really shows today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, it's like an excellent book. Hope people are going to take you up on your offer and you'll get that signed copy. If not, they have the other avenues that they can get it also. And enjoy this great story of this coach from yesteryear that had so much success and is still influential in today's game. And that's always a good thing too. So Mike, thanks for writing the book and telling us the story of George Allen and coming on today and sharing it with us, with the listeners. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. I just want to say that, it's our job to uphold the history of the game. And so I'm very happy to do it. And I felt that it was my responsibility, having grown up with the George Allen Redskins, to really relive his full life and focus on his coaching so much. So I was very, very happy to take on the project.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. we invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. A special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.